Who remembers what we talked about last week? Come on, I'm helping kickstart the thought process this morning. All right. Okay, so in terms of our weekly challenge, we originally started with prayer, but I like how you put it, we took it up a notch last week. We started getting a little bit more specific in thinking about individuals or circumstances or opportunities. All right? What else? Let me help you out a little bit. We looked at Jesus and we said, okay, if we're going to think about evangelism, then this particular topic shouldn't be any different than any other topic that we look at spiritually. That when it comes to our example or a model for us to follow, we only have one supreme example, and that's in Jesus. Where did we spend the bulk of our time last week? What text? John chapter 4. All right, what do we remember from John chapter 4? Any points that you remember from that we talked about or that we learned from in terms of how we can apply that to our evangelistic efforts? There's a lot of things there, so you hit on a lot of it. So one of the first things we notice is Jesus' physical condition. So he'd been journeying, about a 3-day journey. He stops, it's the middle of the day, it's about noon. He's probably tired, he's probably thirsty, he's hungry. We know he's hungry, the text tells us that. So his physical condition was one that he had some needs at the moment. But we see this woman, the Samaritan woman. And Jesus sets aside his personal needs to focus on her spiritual needs. And he crossed several boundaries just when he spoke to this woman. He crossed racial boundaries that existed. The Samaritans were looked down upon by the Jews. That was one strike against her. She was a female. She was a woman. That would have been, in that society, another strike that was against her. So Jesus sets aside his physical needs. He crosses boundaries in order to reach this particular woman and care about her spiritual needs. Brother David, did you have a comment? It was covered? Okay. What else do we learn from this particular example?
He took advantage of the time he had. He plan on saying, I'm going to go find that lady. He came upon us and started talking to her.
All right. I'm going to summarize it. He made the first things first. He put the first things first in. He took advantage of the opportunity that was before him, and what was always at the forefront of Jesus' mind was souls. It was seeking and saving the lost. It was doing the will of the Father. So no matter what the situation was, that always took precedence. All right, what else? When Jesus first engaged her, did she understand what he was saying? All right, so what did Jesus do? Changed his approach a little bit, didn't he? To keep on trying to reach her. So he cut to the heart of the matter, if you will, by showing her that he could see her heart. That he was able to reveal what was in her life, and whether she realized from the text, it doesn't appear that she fully understood who Jesus was, because she thought he was at the very least a prophet, though, because of his ability to do that. So we see that Jesus kind of adapted to the situation when she didn't at first understand the point he was trying to make spiritually. What else? Anything else that you remember from last week that you might take away from it?
She went and told others about almost immediately about having. But now I thought when she went and told others, I thought she said it was Jesus. Am I wrong?
She posed it in the form of a question.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, she said, "Come and see, could this be?" I believe is how it was posed. But you bring up an excellent point, though, because what she did, with the information she had, even though she may not have understood it to its fullest degree, she was evangelistic. By simply going back to her town and saying, "Come and see. Come and see if this could be the Christ." She didn't have all the answers. She may not have understood all the details, but she understood that what was happening was important enough that she needed to go back and just say, "Come and see. Come and find out for yourself. Let's go explore this further. Let's go investigate this together." just come and see. What a great example of evangelism for you and for me. Now, we at that point last week, we had used up a lot of our time and we kind of sped through some other things. I want to go back because we have time. We're going to take several weeks to go through this information. So I don't necessarily want to rush through anything and miss any particular points. I want to go back and let's dig a little bit deeper into some of these examples that we talked about briefly last week. Let's go to John chapter 15. Let's look at this example together as well. We're going to begin in verse 1 of John chapter 15. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, He takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, He prunes it so that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, so neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, he bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away as a branch and dries up. And they gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. Just as the Father has loved me, I have also loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be made full. What's the purpose? Well, before I even pose that question, we'll go more broadly. Who is Jesus talking to here? His disciples. What's the point Jesus is making through this illustration?
You must abide in me.
All right?
You're going to get anywhere.
Okay.
Abide in me.
So one aspect is, in order for you and me, in order for the disciples to accomplish anything of significance, that can only be done through abiding in Christ. Now, how do you abide in Christ? Keep his commandments. All right? Now, what else? What else? What other point is Jesus making? All right, love is at the heart of this. So there's an element. Jesus, on several occasions, especially in the book of John, as you're looking at the last few days of his life, drives home the importance of love, because what it does is it shows unity. There's unity. John chapter 17, Jesus' prayer. There's unity between him and the Father. There's unity between the apostles. There's unity between the disciples broadly. And all of that is meant to show that through that chain, the Father, the Son, all the way down to us, that because of that love, there's unity. What else? What's another point that Jesus is making here? To bear fruit? All right, that's a key one.
Bear fruit on that. He told these people, and he talked to his disciples, that okay, you're clean because of what I've already told you. But now you've got to get out there and bear fruit, and you explain to them that if they're right, they don't bear fruit, they're going to get pruned off and thrown in the fire. So that forever demolish, you're not only one saying, always saying that has been popular for several years in some of the mistaken people.
Okay? So let's go a little bit further on this bearing fruit idea. What does it mean to bear fruit? What does that look like, practically speaking?
The fruits of being a disciple was described later in the scripture, so I'll wait for that.
No, it's okay. Look, go ahead. What are they? What does it look like?
We've got to love,
Okay.
and I have to pray about that.
Well, so I think you're probably referencing the fruit of the Spirit, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, long-suffering, kindness, gentleness, self-control, okay? So that's the fruit of the Spirit. So those are certainly elements. Absolutely. What else? What does it look like, practically speaking, in our day-to-day lives? just the visual image you get in your mind from these verses. I was in Guyana, South America last year, I think it was, and we were studying with a group out of this particular passage. Over there where we were, they had mangoes. It was amazing. These fresh mangoes everywhere you go. And what was interesting is there were several different kinds of mangoes. There was one that right off the tree, it was interesting. It was this spicy and sweet at the same time. And there were several that just had different flavors. So the illustration we made while we were there is if you go to a mango tree, there wasn't a mango tree that had one tree that had all the different kinds of fruit on it. Right? Each tree had its own separate fruit. So that illustration, if you remember back, we referenced last week that the religious world has perverted this particular passage a little bit. Not a little bit, a lot. Because they take this and they want to say that all the different denominations that exist in the world are divines coming off of Christ. Well, that makes no sense because we can't go to a single illustration in nature where you can say, here's one vine that produces different kinds of fruit. You can't go to a tree that's going to have an apple and a pear and a peach and a plum all in that tree. That vine can only produce fruit after its time. Now, we can think about that in terms of nature. We think about the fruit of the Spirit. I want to think about actual things, I guess, for lack of a better word, that you and I can do, actions that show we're bearing fruit. What did Jesus do? He taught people. He shared the message that God had sent him to share, correct? What else? Well, how do you treat others? Now I want to come back to that one. So let's hold that one for a minute. That's going to be an important one. How to treat. We saw that from the woman at the well, didn't we? He broke down barriers in the way that he interacted with other people. One of the things I think that's kind of a sidebar, if we can chase a rabbit for a moment, about John chapter 4, is there are so many that want to say that the religious world, the church, that we don't value women. Jesus elevated the role of women everywhere he went. John chapter 4 is a perfect example. There probably would not, I would say we could almost guarantee the fact there wouldn't have been another religious person, Jew, that would have done what Jesus did. Not a one. So Jesus, the way he treats other people. What else? Okay. So no matter where he was, no matter what the situation was, no matter who the individual was, he used that as an opportunity. All right? What are some other ways that we bear fruit?
He met their needs.
That's a good one. He met their needs. You know, an interesting point about that, we could look at several examples. He met their needs knowing that that's all they cared about, was what they were going to get out of it. And he still did it, didn't he? There are several examples of him healing people when you can make a pretty good implication from the text that the only reason the crowds were there was what they could get out of it. But yet he still met their needs, time and time again. All right? What else? Showed compassion. That'll be another important point we'll make here in just a minute. I think that what's interesting is as we think about these things, and I think it's important sometimes for us to pause and ask that question, what does it look like in action? Because we read these verses, we talk about bearing fruit, we talk about the fruit of the Spirit, and a lot of these verses we can quote. But we got to know how to live it. It's not just being able to quote it, it's not being able to read it, it's not even making a connection in our mind. At some point, it starts in the mind, it has to work its way through our being, but it has to come out in our actions, in the way that we treat people, and how we think about our opportunities to share the message of Jesus with others. Jesus, all he cared about was sharing the message the Father had given him. You and I bearing fruit, it should be the front of our minds to think about the message of Jesus and how we can communicate that, Mark. So let's dig a little bit into that point. If bearing fruit is evidenced in the way that we just described, if it's in the way that we treat other people, if it's in the compassion that we show to others, if it's in the opportunities that we take advantage of, if it's in the fact that we open our mouth and talk about Jesus to other people, What's the implication if we don't do that? According to verse 8. Wow. That's kind of scary, isn't it? I don't know about you, but there are certain verses that I read in Scripture that sometimes just stop you dead in your tracks. Should make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. That there are things that you and I have to do, not because they're check boxes to say that we're checking off the things that God's given us to do, and that it's in no way something that earns us some type of merit or favor. It's what's it done out of? What's our motivation in doing these things? Love. The very thing that Jesus talks about here. It's love. What brought Jesus to earth? Love. What motivated him in his ministry? Love. Love for the Father, love for you and me, love for his apostles. What should motivate you and me to bear fruit? Love. Love for people. Love for each other. We talked last week a little bit, if you remember, the fact that evangelism, it's not just what we do out in the community. Evangelism happens in here too. It happens with you and me, between us and our conversation. It happens in Bible class with our children. It happens at home with our children. It happens when we're out socially and we have an opportunity to interact and we take an interest in each other's lives. All of those things fall under the umbrella of evangelism. Because isn't that what Jesus did by showing compassion and by being involved in each other's lives? Didn't he show compassion to the apostles? Did he care about them and their well-being? His prayer in John chapter 17, I think it's the middle section where he's praying specifically for the apostles. Take some time and go back and study that and see how much he loved the apostles. His concern as his final hours on earth were coming to an end. You get a glimpse into his heart. He doesn't pray for himself in terms of protecting him physically. The only thing he prays about for him is that God would glorify him. And the purpose for that was so that he could in turn glorify God. The rest of that prayer was about the apostles. It was about future disciples, which if you want to think about something neat, Jesus was praying specifically for you and me at the close of John chapter 17. It was all about his love and concern for other people. So when we look at John chapter 15 and we think about bearing fruit and being in the vine, all these things come down to the fact that we have to do this. If we don't do this, if we don't bear fruit, if we don't love other people, if that's not our motivation to do right, Jesus is saying, you're not my disciples. Because it can't be true by doing it that we are his disciples, and the other side has to be true as well, that if we don't do it, we're not his disciples. Those are the only two ways it can be. So, powerful example here in John chapter 15. Any other comments on those few verses? Yes, sir. Oh, that's good.
When I think about the practical things of what's going out and trying to teach people about the good Lord Jesus and the good things that they can have, on that, we run into all of this rejection, and so we have a tendency
So let's hold that last point, which I want to tie into Matthew 28 here in just a moment. Let's talk just for a moment about the rejection piece. Because there's no question that that's a factor we're all going to face. So two examples that Brother Leon mentioned. Noah. Noah preached for over 100 years. And a lot of times we talk about the fact Noah responds. Who did Noah save? His family. And I think we might have made this point in the first week. Is there any greater legacy that every one of us could make if we saved our family? Is there anything that we could do greater than that if every one of us could say we saved our family? Isn't that a great legacy? Wouldn't you want to leave that legacy? And then if your children did that, and their children did that, and their children did that, think about the legacy that we could leave. Think about the impact for the gospel. Tim and I were talking, I guess a couple weeks ago now. We were just talking about evangelism. One of the things that he and I already are learning we both like to do is we like to kind of just dream and talk as we're riding around. Think about if we could just in this one community, think about the unfaithful Christians just in this community. Maybe those that have obeyed the gospel at one point in their life. And I'm talking about those we don't even know. We'd probably be shocked how many in this very community probably have some type of affiliation with the Church of Christ. Think about the impact we could have if we could just get them to come home. Just get them to come back. This room wouldn't hold it all. That's evangelism. That's restoring people. So the impact on our families, Noah, he saved his family. Yes, he might have been rejected, but he left a tremendous legacy to the point that he was represented in the New Testament as a preacher of righteousness. Who has been rejected more than anybody that ever walked the face of this earth? Jesus. Absolutely. I had a friend of mine, we were talking about this one time, he made this point. If Jesus was rejected more than anybody that ever walked the face of this earth, should we expect any different? Any better? We got to remember what our obligation is. Our obligation is, I've heard Tim say this 100 times, sow the seed. Just sow the seed. Just tell people about Jesus. How people react, that's up to them. God will give the increase. Our job's to plan. All right, we'll come back to your last point. I'm not going to forget about it. Let's go to Matthew chapter 9. I think this will tie into the point that Kim made just a moment ago. Matthew chapter 9, let's begin in verse 35. Jesus was going through all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every kind of disease and every kind of sickness. Seeing the people, he felt compassion for them, because they were distressed and dispirited like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Therefore, beseech the Lord of harvest to send out workers into his harvest. What characteristic of Jesus is described here? It's compassion. That's a hallmark of Jesus' ministry. His compassion for people. Why did Jesus have compassion in this particular section? What does it say that he was moved to compassion by? Why? Because they were like what? Sheep without a shepherd. Now, I think we mentioned this a couple weeks ago. I'll see. Anybody remember what that phrase specifically had meaning to here in the first century? These disciples. All right, so that part, yeah. So just from the analogy of a sheep and a shepherd, the sheep would only respond to the voice of their shepherd. That's absolutely correct. What else, though? This was actually a common Jewish phrase. Who was the greatest leader the Jews, well, even before David? Moses. Moses is the one that was held up. So this phrase, they were like a sheep without a shepherd, in the Jewish mind, that had reference to the fact that they were without leadership like Moses. They had not had leadership significant like Moses since he died. And Jesus looked out, and there they were. There are the people, without any direction, without any purpose, without any leadership. And they had, in essence, in many ways been that way since Moses died. And as a result of that lack of leadership, that lack of purpose, that lack of direction, Jesus had compassion on them. Because they were basically just wandering around like sheep without a shepherd. So compassion is a hallmark of Jesus' ministry. Now, as we look at these examples, we start to see a pattern here for evangelism. John chapter 4, the Samaritan woman went back and she told others, right? We talked last week about 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 2 that there's this pattern of pass it on philosophy. Each one teach one. So a key priority, our mission. Let's go to Matthew chapter 28, verses 18 through 20. Somebody read those verses for me.
Jesus came spake and said, All power is given to me in heaven and in earth. Go therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I command you, and lo, always even to the end.
All right, what are you and I to do? There's a what to this verse. What are you and I to do? Teach with the purpose of doing what? Making disciples. What's a disciple? A follower of Jesus, correct? We're supposed to make disciples of Christ. That's what you and I are supposed to do. How do you, if you're going to make it a follower of Jesus, what do you have to do? Okay, you got to be one, first of all. You can't teach somebody to be something that you're not yourself, correct? Who are you going to have to talk about? Jesus. Our job is to point people to Christ. That's our job. Now, how do you do that? How do you become a disciple? So the what is to make disciples, but it also tells us how one becomes a disciple. Baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's the how a person becomes a disciple. Does it stop there? What do we do then? Teaching them to observe all things that it commanded. And then what's the assurance that we have? His presence. That Christ will be with us. There's the formula. There's our mission. That's the mission of the church. To go into the world and make disciples. To teach. Now how people respond, that's up to them. But those that want to respond, they become disciples by being baptized into Christ. That's how they become a follower of Jesus. But it doesn't stop. I think I made this comment a few weeks ago. I can't help but picture in my mind that maybe the disciples thought their work was over. But Jesus is reminding them here in this verse that your work is just beginning. It's not over. It's just getting started. And I think there's an analogy there for you and for me that as someone is baptized and they come up out of the water, our work is not done. It's just beginning. Now we have to continue teaching. We have to continue that process of growth and development to help with the spiritual maturation of individuals as they come up out of the water. And too many times, I'm afraid, as we look back in history within the Lord's church, we get them in the water, they're baptized, and we don't do as good of a job with teaching them to observe all things, the follow-up piece of it. That's an important aspect of this too. That's the full picture of the Great Commission. That's the full picture of the mission of the church. Making disciples and how we do that and how we continue to follow up. Now, here becomes a tough question. This is one of those look in the mirror questions. How do we view that mission? How do we view it? Okay? As an opportunity. How else? It's our responsibility. Okay? What else? Something you what? Okay. Something you want to do instead of have to do. All right? What else? How do we view it? So that's a great point. That maybe ties the other comments together. Here's the tough part. Boy, and this was hard for me this week, all right? As I thought about this and challenged myself that question, how do you view it? And here's what I kind of get from your comment. Do my actions align with my words? And boy, isn't that at the heart of Christianity in general, though? That's a tough part of Christianity all the way around. And especially think about it in terms of teaching and preaching. That your life has to, within the best of your ability, understanding that we're going to fail, that we have weaknesses in our lives and we're not perfect, but to the best of our ability, do our actions align with our words? So if our mission is this, if our mission is to make disciples, and we do that by baptizing them, and the Lord adds them to the church, and then we have a responsibility to follow up with them. Now the rubber meets the road when we start saying, do our actions align to that? See, that's what starts to get me excited about where we are as a congregation. Because we are aligning our actions around this mission. That's what our goal is. That's what we're trying to do as a group of people, as brothers and sisters in Christ. That's what the purpose of Rob Whitaker coming. That's the purpose of the classes that John Burnett and others did that went over the 3 books and back to the Bible. That's the purpose of what we're trying to do now as we engage in this study of looking at personal evangelism. That's what our shepherds are doing as they try to put before us the importance of evangelism. As we send out emails during the week about praying for individuals that are engaged in Bible studies, what we're trying to do, and it's exciting, is say, let's make sure our actions align with what we're saying. Let's make sure that we walk the walk. Let's make sure that we're out there fulfilling the mission. Because that's what we're commanded to do. And that becomes the exciting part. That you and I can feed off of each other. That we can help each other because we're all going to have different abilities. We're going to have different gifts. We're going to have different ways that we can be a part of this mission. We won't all play the exact same role. But there is one role we all have to play. In some capacity, every day, we need to be talking about Jesus to somebody. Every day. Whether it's our family at home, whether it's with our children as we're sitting at the house, riding in the car, whether it's a next door neighbor, whether it's somebody at the grocery store, whether it's a co-worker, in some way, every day, we need to be talking about Jesus in some capacity. Somebody. And it might be to help strengthen a fellow brother or sister. It might be to share it with somebody that's never heard. But every day we got to be doing that. Any thoughts or comments?
Lance,
Yes, sir.
part of what you're saying too to me as well is when you're trying to lead people or convince them, a big part of it is your influence. And your influence comes across to others as how your attitude is and are you approachable and so forth. And one of the things that was resounding to me that Jesus was also trying to teach his apostles was your servant leadership. You must become a servant. You remember the passage in Matthew 20 where he said, the Gentiles use their authority to lord over you, but not so with you. If you want to be important then, or to be famous, or whatever you want to call it, to gain influence, you've got to lower yourself. Again, the night before he died, after the Lord's Supper, when he girded himself, and he was trying to show them an example of servant leadership. He said, you guys don't understand what I'm doing, but you will. And that's all part of the attitude of that love and compassion that we're pointing out, is that servant leadership that Jesus brought to the table.
Yeah. It's the idea of others before self.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't think there's anything in our Christian life that we really can't point to that when it comes down to it, if we're doing it the way we should, it doesn't ultimately at its heart have the idea of just putting others before us. Because that's what love is. I mean, that's what godly love is. It's others' needs before us, before our own. And that's a lot easier said than done a lot of times because our human nature is not necessarily wired that way because Satan is constantly picking at us, trying to get us to think in a different way. All right, any other thoughts? All right. Here's how we concluded last week. We talked about the importance of bearing fruit, of staying connected to the vine. We talked about the importance of studying our example, Jesus. And we talked about the importance of having compassion. And each one teach one. So those were the key points that we left with last week. And then our challenge is this: stay focused on the mission. One of the things that I think about often is, and I'll share with you something that at times keeps me awake at night when I think about my own life and how I engage in ministry and with others. As hard as we're working to try to get to souls and impact souls and help people see Jesus, Satan's working just as hard to prevent it. We don't ever need to forget how powerful Satan is. But here's the key. We don't ever want to sit there and say that he's working harder than we are for souls. That's the key. Yes, Satan's going to be working. But you see, we've got the comfort of knowing that Jesus is with us, as Tim said. And with him, with Jesus with us, if we work like we're supposed to work, Jesus will win. This plan will work. It'll absolutely work. We just have to make sure that we stay focused on the mission. All right, any other comments just about this section in general and the things we've covered so far? All right, let's transition then into a different thought. What is conviction? If you had to define conviction, what would it be?
Drive, determination.
Did you say pride?
Drive.
Drive and determination. All right? Drive and determination. What else? Okay? That goes along with steadfast. Somebody over here? Okay. Persuasion. All right. What are some things that people are convicted about in the world? All right. Okay. So I'll summarize that by saying there are those that are convicted about God's goodness, even though it might be misplaced to a degree, but they're convicted about that. Okay? What else? Okay? So there are situations in society that people are convicted about in terms of helping to prevent or helping to stop or helping to, in some situations, increase in ways. Okay? What else? All right, so driven, and this gets back, I think, to the points made earlier. If you're convicted about something, what does it usually lead you to do? Action. That's right. If you're truly convicted about something, it'll lead you to action. You can think of several practical illustrations. You go to the doctor. Maybe the doctor tells you about something that relates to your health. It says, if you don't do A, B, and C, then it's going to result in this. If you're convicted about it, what are you going to do? You're going to do A, B, and C, right? If you're not convicted, are you going to change? Probably not. If you're truly convicted, though, of what that person's telling you, it's going to make a difference. You go to a financial planner, and the financial planner sits down, reviews everything with you, and it says, if you invest in this, you can expect double-digit growth over time. If you do this for the next 20 years, you can expect to have X amount of dollars. If you're convicted by that, what are you going to do? You're going to invest, correct? If you're not convicted, what are you going to do? Take it or leave it. So there are circumstances throughout our life that we can point to that would illustrate the fact that if somebody's convicted about something, they're going to act on it. What prevents most people from acting on their convictions? Fear. I would say, and you might disagree, that fear might be the biggest thing that keeps people from acting on their convictions. Fear paralyzes in many ways. Is fear in and of itself bad? No. In fact, are we supposed to have fear? What type of fear are we supposed to have? Godly fear. What is godly fear? It's respect. It's awe of who He is. It's a fear that motivates us to do what? To do something. To act. To live right. To do His will. It's a fear that leads to some form of action. The type of fear that Satan wants us to have is a fear that paralyzes. It prevents us from doing anything. So when it comes to evangelism, if we're convicted about Jesus, that He truly was the Son of God, as John chapter 1 and verse 1 says, that in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, and then verse 14 says that Word became what? Flesh and dwelt among us. If we're convicted that that's true, that Jesus, deity, Son of God, came in the flesh as the God-man, deity and man at the same time, lived among us, lived among man, and that He died on the cross for our sins. If we believe that to be true, then that would convict us to do something. The tool that Satan wants to use, though, is fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of I'm not good enough. Fear of I can't. And that's prevented a lot of work for the Lord over the course of history. And we'll get to that point. It's a good point. So what does it take then? Maybe we'll end on this thought. What does it take to live out your convictions? All right? Maybe I would take that and say it's a being fully convinced that we do have Jesus on our side. And understanding that He is there, that we have His Word to guide us. What else?
Preparation.
Oh, preparation. That's a good one. Preparation. Spending time and planning and preparing to go out and live it. All right? What else? So I'll give you one more. I'm going to keep you here till you do one more. I've got you.
Practice.
What? All right, we need Christ. We need to hold on to Him. What do you say?
Expect to win if you don't practice.
Practice. All right? That's a good one too. Planning and practice. We'll talk more about that as we go along. Thank you for your attention this morning.